Good evening. Welcome back to the Glazov Gang. Our gang members this evening, our third segment of this three-part series. Bruce Thornton, author of The Wages of Appeasement. Nonie Darwish, author of the new book, The Devil We Don't Know. And Robert Spencer, the author of the book that's coming out soon, Did Muhammad Exist? Before we begin the discussion for this program, are you a little bit, this new book, is this going to be your most controversial one?
I expect it might be, but I've written some other controversial books in the past, so I'm not really concerned about it.
Just very quickly, is there a possibility that Muhammad did not exist?
Oh, certainly, yes. Very briefly, 60 years after the Arab conquest started, when they swept all through the Middle East and North Africa, Persia, up into Spain, into India, there's no mention from either the conquered people or the conquerors in any of their surviving documents, monuments, anything of Muhammad, Quran, or Islam. Now, that's a very strange omission because the standard story is that they came out of Arabia with the Quran in their hands, the words of Muhammad on their lips, and that was the impetus for the conquest.
What happens if it turns out Muhammad didn't exist? And
what happens?
Like, what are the consequences of your book in terms of what if it's accepted and if, I don't know, what does this mean? What is the
Well, I suppose the primary implication is that Islam is a political system first and foremost, and that it is a construct of an empire that was trying to create a religion because all the religions were bound together by, all the empires were bound together by religion in those days. So they constructed this religion that was martial, militaristic, imperialist, authoritarian, in order to make their empire strong and to control their subject people.
Nonie, if Muhammad did not exist, what would you think?
It really doesn't matter. Islam is here. Whether he exists or not, his presence is there. His impact is there, and the obsession that he left his people with. And I have a chapter in my book called "A Muslim's Burden." In Christianity, Jesus supposedly came down to save us. But in Islam, Muslims are burdened with protecting Muhammad. A Muslim must protect the reputation of Muhammad. He has the right actually to kill apostates. So a Muslim individual is burdened with saving Muhammad instead of Jesus coming to save us.
Right. So
this is a big dynamic difference.
You might come under the greatest threats with this book as opposed
I think so, yeah. But I'll tell you, I think obviously...
I have an extra bedroom in my apartment.
Nonie's right in the sense... Oh, no, I've been to your apartment. Sorry. But look, Nonie's right in a certain sense that it doesn't matter because Muslims believe that Muhammad existed and that he did these certain things, and so they act upon them. And that's actually the subject of my earlier book, The Biography of Muhammad, based on the earliest Muslim sources, The Truth About Muhammad. But this book, it actually it matters a great deal because it goes right to the heart of what Nonie's saying about how Muslims believe they have a responsibility to protect the image of Islam, to protect Muhammad. We're actually translating this, it's in the process of being translated into Arabic, this new book, Did Muhammad Exist? And we're going to make that available as a free PDF. We're going to try to distribute it in the Islamic world as much as possible to try to undermine exactly this fanatical allegiance to Muhammad.
Do you get a little bit frightened at the consequences of telling these truths?
No, I'm not worried about anything, Jamie. I got no worries because
We're not worried.
People say, "Well, you get death threats," and I say, "Well, it's not as if I stop doing this tomorrow and go back to the saxophone, I'm not going to be immortal."
You play the saxophone?
I used to.
Why didn't you bring one on the show? Bruce, your thoughts on Did Muhammad Exist?
Well, I think the point is made, and we see other examples. An illusion or a lie can still become a historical agent.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, the great example is the lunatic racial ideology of Nazism was false through and through, yet it became a historical agent that wrought a lot of destruction. So at one level, it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
The other side of that coin, though, is that historical criticism of Judaism and Christianity transformed Judaism and Christianity and their status in Western society. Mm-hmm. And so the same thing has never happened
to Islam,
in the Islamic world.
And I really appreciate your point that you mentioned in your book. You're mentioning about your book that when they conquered all these great civilizations, the Arabian Peninsula really was nobody cared to conquer it because it didn't have any wealth, it didn't have any civilization. The great conquerors like Alexander the Great, he stopped at Egypt. He didn't want to penetrate Saudi Arabia at that time. But it's Arabia when they were overpopulating at that time, and they had no rivers, no wealth. They had to expand towards the outside and conquer these great civilizations, Egypt, Persia, all the way to Turkey. And this is where the rivers were, where the wealth were. And so they conquered them. They probably that's a new thing I really never heard. Thank you for telling us that they really conquered as Arabian people who came and conquered Egypt, conquered Persia, and then they were confronted with Judaism, with Christianity that they couldn't deal with, and for that they have to counter it with a religion that made Christianity and Judaism a false religion, and we are coming with the real stuff, and it's all a dynamic that had to happen historically in order for Arabia and the Arabian people to be empowered in these great civilizations that were conquered, Persia and Egypt.
Okay, we've obviously hit on a very important subject, and each of you are very passionate about it. It's your research interest, so maybe I don't want to move on too quickly if this is what really is the subject of interest here. A final note on this from Bruce or Robert? Bruce?
Well, I've always thought that Islam is a theologized tribal warrior principles or values. In other words, everything about it is expressive of raiders, right? Those who go out, who start on the edges of civilization, who penetrate as far as they can, who take bites and bites and bites. And it's interesting that, and chicken and the egg, which comes first? Do they grow up together? Does the ideology of jihad precede? Does it come after, as you're suggesting, as a way of dealing with the more advanced civilizations? But it certainly was a powerful, dynamic ideology for a raiding people that now want to expand right into an empire. It's an imperialistic, the true imperialism.
Yeah. Islam is the most imperialist ideology.
Yeah. It's a foolproof warrior credo, because the warriors, they if they win in this life, then they get the goods of the people they conquer, their wives, their houses, their treasure, whatever they have. And if they lose, if they die, then they go to paradise and they enjoy these virgins. And so it's a foolproof win-win situation. And it's as crude as that may seem to us in the 21st century, that created a fighting force that was unmatched.
Robert, I don't mean to be facetious or absurd here, but I've always been interested in this. If a male jihadist dies in battle, he gets 72 virgins, but we know that there's female suicide bombers in Islam. What do they
paradise is promised to Muslim women who are righteous, but it's never described.
But do they have sex with virgin males?
It's never described.
Oh.
So there's no answer to that, really. The 72 virgins.
I'm just wondering.
One thing that's actually in the book, we've all heard, I'm sure, about the great scholar Christoph Luxemburg's philological explorations on the Quran, and how he shows that the huris, the virgins in paradise, is actually something expropriated from Christian material, Christian homiletics that were speaking about paradise as being this garden, like the Garden of Eden, and talking about the people in paradise enjoying refreshment and raisins and that's the word that was used in that. And in this book, I've got quite a bit more on how the Quran is actually an amalgamation of various texts, and that there's quite a bit of a Christian substratum in there. They took existing materials and fashioned this new martial credo out of them.
Robert, please, very briefly, what gave you the idea to write this book, whether Muhammad existed or not? What did you run into?
This is something that has been explored by great scholars for decades, but it's all been on a level that has not penetrated the popular discourse.
If a Muslim wrote this book with that title and start walking down the street in Iran and Saudi Arabia, how long
he'd be killed. Look, there have been Muslims who have been here, who have explored this. Mohammed Sven Kalish is a European. I forget if he's Danish or Swedish, but in any case, he was a convert to Islam and a professor at a university teaching Islam, and he started to explore these questions, and he went through looking at the same material I discuss in this book, and he ultimately stated that Muhammad is not a historical character, that the whole thing has no historical basis, and he renounced Islam. But of course, he got the predictable threats. Suleiman Bashir is another one.
But did he survive?
Yeah, he's still alive now. But
Suleiman
Bashir, just very briefly, was a professor in the West Bank who also started to study the obscure origins of Islam in history and came to a lot of the same conclusions because they're pretty inescapable. And his students actually threw him out the window of the classroom.
Goodness gracious. I misrepresented a little bit the segment for this show, saying we would discuss the Republican presidential contest, but we had a fascinating
they're all
discussion.
clowns and losers anyway, Jamie.
We end with...
Better than the present occupant, though.
Indeed, but that's not saying much.
We end... Okay, well then, very quickly, what's going to happen? Who's going to win the Republican presidential contest?
Obama.
No, the Republican.
I heard what you said.
So Obama's the winner in the end?
Yes.
Nonie, prediction?
I hope not.
But what's the prediction?
My prediction, Romney. That's what I want.
And then Romney versus Obama. And
Romney
who will win?
versus Obama. Romney will win.
You think Romney will win? You say Obama will win?
I believe Romney will be the nominee. Everything is going to come down to what happens in September and October.
Okay.
Anything that's happening now, I don't care if it's gas prices, unemployment, something that happens in September and October, whether with gas prices, with Israel and Iran, or whatever, that's going to determine the election. 15
seconds each from each of you before we say goodnight. What are the Glazov gang members doing in the near future that satisfies them and fulfills them? Bruce?
Drink Guinness.
Drink Guinness? Nonie?
Take a vacation.
Take a vacation? Where are you going to go?
I haven't decided
Dominican?
yet.
Nonie and I are going to Dearborn, Michigan.
Oh, really?
On April
for a
29th
conference.
for the Jessica Mokdad Memorial Conference. She was a victim of honor killing in Dearborn. And Pamela Geller and I are hosting a conference there on April 29th to show up the injustice of honor killing and the supine response of American authorities. Nonie will be speaking.
Now, Rob, that's fantastic, Robert. I hate to put you on the spot, but you mentioned the saxophone. This is your chance to show your musical talents.
I don't have it with
before
me.
we go, but can you at least sing? You have also a very nice voice. Can we get a little tune from you?
No, I don't have the instrument with me.
But you sing when you do play music.
No.
Okay, a saxophone the next time.
This is part the cut.
Okay, Bruce Thornton, Nonie Darwish, Robert Spencer, thank you for joining the Glazov gang.
Thank you.
Join
My
us again next
pleasure.
week. Good night.